We're terminating your position due to budget cuts. Marjorie's words hit me like a physical blow. I sat frozen in that too-bright conference room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. My boss stared at me with those cold eyes, while Denise from HR shuffled papers beside her. My heart hammered against my ribs. 16 years. I'd given this company 16 years of my life, and this was how it ended? In a sterile room that smelled like cheap coffee and broken promises? Marjorie slid a severance folder across the table. The gesture was so casual, like she was passing me a menu at lunch instead of ending my career. We appreciate your service, Kira, but the company is restructuring. I forced myself to speak through the tightness in my throat. So you're saying my role no longer exists? Marjorie didn't even blink. There is no more budget for your position. These are difficult decisions, but they're necessary for the company's future. I nodded slowly, gathering what remained of my dignity. As I stood to leave, something on the credenza behind Denise caught my eye. A manila folder, partially open. The label faced me clearly. Onboarding plan, Senior Research Lead, start date, Monday. Senior Research Lead, that was my exact title. Monday was 3 days away. I walked through the hallway in a fog, my mind struggling to process what I'd just seen. The folder, the title, the date. It couldn't mean what I thought it meant, could it? Have you seen the new girl's LinkedIn? 2 junior employees stood by the break room, their voices carrying down the empty corridor. She's starting Monday as Senior Research Lead. Poor Kira. The taller one giggled nervously. I know, it's so awkward. Like, why lie about budget cuts? Their words sliced through me like broken glass. I stood there, completely visible to them, watching their faces drain of color when they realized I'd heard everything. They scattered like frightened birds. So it was true. There were no budget cuts. My position wasn't being eliminated. I was simply being replaced. I forced my legs to carry me back to my desk. 16 years of memories surrounded me. Photos of company events, awards gathering dust, a cactus someone had given me 3 Christmases ago. All of it suddenly felt like evidence of wasted time. I sat down heavily and opened my email, needing something to focus on besides the crushing weight in my chest. A new message sat at the top of my inbox. The subject line made my stomach drop. Replacing Kira, strategy and timeline. Someone had accidentally copied me on the thread. My hands trembled as I clicked the email. The thread stretched back 6 weeks, message after message documenting a carefully planned execution. My execution. I scrolled through conversations between Marjorie, Denise, and 2 executives whose names I barely recognized. They discussed me like I was a problem to solve, an obstacle to remove. We need to phase out Kira without triggering legal trouble, one message read. Another said, she's too old school for our new brand direction, not relevant anymore. My vision blurred as I kept reading. They called me a dinosaur. They said I was stuck in my ways. They complained that I asked too many questions and slowed down their innovative processes. None of it was true. I'd learned every new system they'd implemented. I'd adapted to every change. I'd trained half the people in this department, including the ones who were now apparently celebrating my removal. Marjorie had written, "The replacement is younger, cheaper, and better connected. Plus, she's my friend's niece, so we know she'll fit our culture." The final email in the chain, sent just yesterday, made my hands shake with anger. Move forward with the budget cut story. Legal doesn't need details unless she fights back. Keep it simple and clean. I hit download, saving every message to my personal cloud storage. Then I saved them again to a thumb drive. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and finally let myself apart. 16 years of dedication, erased with a lie. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes felt like sandpaper. I'd missed my nephew's wedding for a project deadline. I'd canceled vacations to handle emergencies. I'd worked through weekends and holidays, always believing that loyalty and hard work would be rewarded eventually. Instead, they'd plotted my removal while I was saving their latest crisis. The tears came in waves, each one carrying years of swallowed disappointment. Every time I'd been passed over for promotion, every time someone younger and less experienced had been chosen to lead projects I'd built. Every condescending comment about my traditional approach when I was just being thorough. I cried until there was nothing left. Then I sat in silence, staring at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. My face looked older than I remembered, worn down by years of fighting for respect I'd never really received. But somewhere between the grief and the rage, something shifted. A cold clarity settled over me like armor. This wasn't incompetence or bad luck. This was premeditated. They documented their illegal plan, convinced I'd be too old, too tired, too scared to fight back. I opened my laptop and began organizing evidence into labeled folders. If they think I won't fight, I whispered, they picked the wrong old lady. The next morning, I returned to clear out my desk. The office felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. How many other people had been removed this way? How many had taken their severance and left quietly, never knowing they'd been illegally discriminated against? I was packing my awards into a cardboard box when Jenna appeared beside me. She was 28, bright, and one of the junior analysts I'd trained. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Kira, can we talk? Privately?" She glanced around nervously. I followed her into an empty conference room. She closed the door and turned to face me, tears already forming in her eyes. "This isn't right," she said. "What they did to you. It's not right, and everyone knows it." "It's just business, Jenna," I replied, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "No," she shook her head firmly. "It's not. Marjorie's been bragging about it in the team chat. She said she was finally getting rid of the dinosaur so she could hire her friend's niece." The confirmation hurt, even though I'd already known. Jenna reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. I copied everything, the chat logs, the hiring timeline, the HR approvals. "They replaced you months ago, Kira. They just waited for the right moment to tell you." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and inserted Jenna's flash drive into my laptop. My hands were steady now, the shock burned away by cold determination. The files were devastating. An offer letter to my replacement dated 3 months before my termination. 3 full months. They'd been planning this since March, and it's now June. I opened the chat logs next. Managers joking about making sure the old guard doesn't lawyer up. Someone had written, "Just tell them it's budget cuts. Works every time." There were internal memos, too, instructing team leads to keep Kira in the dark about organizational changes. They deliberately excluded me from meetings and decisions, isolating me so my removal would seem natural. One message from Marjorie stood out like a neon sign. "Legal will rubber stamp anything if we phrase it as restructuring and budget cuts. They don't ask questions as long as we use the right language." So this wasn't just about me. This was a system they'd perfected, a script they'd used before and would use again. They'd figured out how to remove unwanted employees while hiding behind corporate-approved language. I leaned back in my chair, processing everything I'd learned. They'd assumed I would take my severance and disappear quietly. They'd banked on me being too old, too beaten down, too scared to challenge them. Tomorrow, I would start proving them wrong. Mr. Alvarez's office was located in a modest building downtown. His reception area was professional but understated, with worn leather chairs and walls lined with law books. I'd chosen him based on his reputation for employment discrimination cases. When he called me in, I laid out everything across his conference table. The emails, the chat logs, the replacement's offer letter dated months before my termination. My own performance reviews showing 16 years of excellent ratings. The timeline that proved my position wasn't eliminated, just transferred to someone younger and cheaper. Mr. Alvarez studied each document carefully. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that reminded me of a hawk. He took his time, reading every page thoroughly before speaking. My blood turned to ice. When he finally looked up, his expression was serious. Miss Kira, this isn't just wrongful termination. This appears to be age discrimination, fraudulently documented restructuring, and preemptive replacement with documented intent to deceive. The evidence is remarkably clear. Can we win? I asked. With evidence this strong, they'd be foolish to fight it. He leaned forward, but I need to ask you something important. Are you willing to play a long game and stay very, very quiet while we build this case? No social media posts, no venting to former colleagues, complete silence. I thought about Marjorie's smug face, about being called a dinosaur, about every employee who might face the same fate if nobody stopped this pattern. Yes, I said, whatever it takes. While Mr. Alvarez quietly built our case, I needed to focus on finding work. At 55, I knew my options were limited. Age discrimination didn't stop just because you were suing your former employer. I updated my LinkedIn profile and polished my resume. 3 days later, I received a message from Novatech Analytics, a major competitor to my former company. They'd noticed my profile updates and wanted to talk. I agreed to meet, expecting a preliminary conversation. Instead, I found myself in a formal interview with their entire executive team. They asked detailed questions about my experience, my approach to research methodology, and my thoughts on industry trends. They seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, not just checking boxes. 2 hours later, they made an offer that left me speechless. We're prepared to bring you on as Director of Research Analytics, their CEO said. Significant increase in salary compared to your previous position, full creative freedom, and you'll build your own team. Director level. After 16 years of being passed over for promotions, a competitor was handing me the title I'd always deserved. I stared at the offer letter, hardly believing what I was reading. The salary was nearly double what I'd been making. There's one thing you should know, the CEO added casually. Your former company is one of our biggest vendors. We rely on them for critical data reports. For now, anyway. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. My first week at Novatech opened my eyes to just how interconnected our industry was. My new company depended heavily on my old employer for specialized data analysis reports, the exact kind of work I used to oversee personally. From my new position, I could see everything falling apart. The reports that used to be pristine now came back full of errors. Deadlines were missed. Analysis was shallow and incomplete. Quality had plummeted. What happened over there? My new colleague asked, frustrated with yet another substandard report. These used to be gold standard. Now they're barely usable. I knew exactly what had happened. They'd removed their most experienced analyst and replaced her with an unqualified friend's niece. Marjorie was probably scrambling to cover up the mistakes, blaming legacy issues I'd supposedly left behind. During a leadership meeting, our CEO frowned at the latest delayed report. This is the 3rd late delivery this month. He turned to me. Kira, you know them, right? You worked there for years. Is there something off we should know about? I don't tolerate shady partners. The question hung in the air. I could feel the power shift happening in real time. My old company had tried to make me powerless. Instead, they'd accidentally positioned me to become their biggest problem. I'll monitor the quality closely, I said, carefully, and I'll let you know if I see patterns that concern me. The CEO nodded, satisfied, but I could see him making mental notes. 2 weeks into my new position, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. You need to know what's happening here. It's falling apart. I called her back during my lunch break. She answered immediately, her voice hushed and tense. The new hire is drowning, Jenna said. She has no idea what she's doing. Every report comes back with mistakes, and Marjorie keeps blaming you. She tells everyone the problems are legacy issues Kira left behind. I listened as Jenna described the chaos, projects spiraling out of control, clients complaining, deadlines missed. The department was collapsing without someone who actually knew what they were doing. But that's not even the worst part, Jenna continued. They're doing it again. 3 more older employees have been called into meetings about restructuring. Same script, same budget cuts excuse, and we're finding out later that younger replacements were already hired. My grip tightened on the phone. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was systematic. Can you document it? I asked. Dates, names, timelines? I'm already doing it, she replied. A few of us are. We're scared we might be next. After we hung up, I immediately forwarded everything to Mr. Alvarez. His response came within minutes. Perfect. We're not going after just your case anymore. The game had changed. 2 days later, Mr. Alvarez called me into his office. When I arrived, 2 other people were already there. A woman who looked to be in her early 50s and a man who appeared to be in his 60s. Kira, meet Patricia and Vincent, Mr. Alvarez said. They were also restructured by your former employer. My stomach sank. How many others had there been? Patricia spoke first. Her story was painfully familiar. 15 years with the company, excellent performance reviews, then suddenly terminated for budget reasons. 2 weeks later, her replacement started, a younger woman connected to upper management. Vincent's timeline was even more blatant. He'd been told his position was being eliminated entirely. The following Monday, someone 30 years younger sat at his old desk, doing his old job with his old title. We compared our termination letters. They were identical except for our names. The same language, the same vague references to budget constraints and organizational restructuring. This isn't isolated incidents, Mr. Alvarez said, spreading our documents across his desk. This is systematic age discrimination. They have a playbook and they've used it multiple times. He looked at each of us. With 3 victims willing to testify, we can file a formal complaint that will force corporate legal to investigate. But I need to know you're all committed to seeing this through. They targeted us because they thought we were old and powerless, Patricia said quietly. I'm done being powerless. Vincent nodded. Let's do it. I agreed immediately. This was bigger than my hurt feelings now. The following week, Jenna sent me a video file. My hands trembled as I downloaded it to my laptop. Manager happy hour last night, her accompanying text explained. You need to hear this. I pressed play. The footage was shaky, clearly recorded on someone's phone from across a dimly lit bar. I could see several managers from my old company, drinks in hand, laughing loudly. Then I heard Marjorie's voice, unmistakable even through the poor audio quality. The trick is all in the phrasing, she said, slurring slightly. You just have to use the magic words. Budget cuts and performance concerns. Legal signs off on anything if you frame it right. They don't ask questions. The other managers laughed and raised their glasses. Old guard out, new blood in, Marjorie continued. It's that simple. Just make sure your documentation looks clean. Someone off camera asked, what about Kira? Isn't she going to be a problem? Marjorie's laugh was cruel. Kira, please. She's harmless. She won't do a thing. She'll take her severance check and fade away like all the others. More laughter echoed through the recording. I watched the video 3 more times, my face completely expressionless. They'd handed me a recorded confession of their systematic discrimination, complete with mockery of their victims. I forwarded the video to Mr. Alvarez with a single line, evidence of premeditated pattern. His response was immediate. This changes everything. They just confessed. We file next week. I replayed the video one final time. She's harmless, Marjorie had said. She was about to learn otherwise. Mr. Alvarez laid out our strategy. We wait exactly 4 weeks before filing. During that time, we gather everything we can. More witnesses, more documentation, more evidence. Why wait? Patricia asked, frustrated. Because we only get one shot, he explained. If we file too early with incomplete evidence, they'll mount a defense and plug the holes. But if we wait and build an airtight case, they'll have nowhere to hide. The 4 weeks felt endless. I focused on my work at Novatech while quietly documenting every failure in the reports from my old company. The problems were escalating. Clients were complaining. Quality continued its downward spiral. During a tense executive meeting, our CEO slammed his hand on the conference table. One more screw-up from them and we're terminating the contract. This is embarrassing. I saw my opening. Before you make that decision, there's something you should see. I pulled out a carefully prepared report documenting the correlation between management changes at my old company and declining work quality. I'd spent days on it, making sure every claim was supported by evidence. Their problems aren't operational, I explained. They're ethical. They've been systematically removing experienced employees and replacing them with unqualified people who have personal connections to management. The CEO read through my report, his expression darkening with each page. If legal gets involved with them, he said finally, we're not protecting them. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation. That afternoon, Mr. Alvarez and I filed our formal complaint. The complaint was comprehensive and devastating. 3 victims, each with documented evidence. Chat logs showing systematic targeting of older employees. Video evidence of managers bragging about their illegal methods. Timelines proving positions weren't eliminated, just transferred to younger replacements. I also included detailed documentation of how these practices had damaged the company's operational capacity, affecting clients and business partners. It wasn't just about what they'd done to us, it was about the ripple effects of their corruption. You've essentially destroyed their vendor relationships, Mr. Alvarez noted. That's strategic. They destroyed them themselves, I replied. I'm just making sure everyone sees it. Within days, Jenna texted me updates. Corporate legal had received our complaint and was in full panic mode. They were pulling every termination file from the past 2 years, looking for liability exposure. At Novatech, our CEO called me into his office. We've been contacted by investigators, he said. They're asking about our experience as a vendor, about whether we've noticed operational issues or concerns about management practices. What did you tell them? I asked. The truth, he replied simply, that quality collapsed after management changes, that we've lost confidence in their leadership, that we're reviewing whether to continue the relationship. He paused, studying my face. Kira, I want you to know that if you need to testify or participate in any investigation, you have our full support. We don't work with companies that treat people like garbage. Something loosened in my chest. Real support. Institutional backing. I'd never had that at my old company. 2 weeks after filing the complaint, I received an email that made my pulse race. The sender was Helen Fitzgerald from corporate legal at my former employer. This is Helen Fitzgerald, Corporate Legal Counsel. We are conducting an internal investigation regarding recent personnel matters and would like to request a formal statement from you regarding your employment termination. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to schedule a time. I immediately forwarded it to Mr. Alvarez. He called me within 5 minutes. This is it, he said. They've realized they have a major problem and they're scrambling to assess the damage. The statement you give will shape everything that follows. What should I say? The truth. Every documented fact, every timeline discrepancy, every piece of evidence. But you need to be surgical about it. Emotional testimony can be dismissed as bitterness. Facts can't be dismissed. I spent the entire weekend preparing my statement. I wrote and rewrote every paragraph, ensuring every claim was backed by documents. Dates, names, quotes from emails and chat logs, screenshots, video transcripts, performance reviews, the replacement's offer letter. 15 pages of precise, devastating facts. The final paragraph was the most important. I was informed my position was being terminated due to budget cuts. However, evidence shows my replacement had already been hired 3 months prior, started work the next business day, and was personally connected to management. This pattern has repeated with multiple employees, suggesting systematic discrimination rather than legitimate restructuring. On Sunday evening, I attached every piece of supporting evidence and hit send. Then I waited. The response was immediate and chaotic. According to Jenna, corporate legal descended on the company like a swarm. They pulled files, interviewed employees, and confronted managers with timeline contradictions. Marjorie and Denise were called into emergency meetings. The HR department went into lockdown, refusing to approve any terminations without legal review. Middle managers who'd stayed quiet suddenly remembered concerns they'd had but never voiced. "It's complete chaos," Jenna texted. "Legal is questioning everything. Everyone's terrified. Marjorie looks like she hasn't slept in days." Patricia called me that evening. "Corporate legal contacted me too. They want my statement." "Did you give them one?" I asked. "Sent it this morning, 12 pages, documenting everything." She paused. "Kira, I think we actually have them. Vincent heard they're talking about suspending people pending investigation." I felt grim satisfaction. The machine was finally turning against those who'd thought they controlled it. But it wasn't just the three of us anymore. Jenna reported that other employees, emboldened by rumors of the investigation, were submitting their own complaints. Stories of retaliation, fabricated performance issues, selective enforcement of policies. What started as 3 cases was becoming an avalanche. 2 days later, I received another email from corporate legal. "Your statement has been corroborated by multiple independent sources. We may contact you for follow-up questions. Thank you for your thorough documentation and cooperation." I read it twice, then allowed myself a small smile. They believed me. They believed us. The pressure was building from multiple directions. While corporate legal conducted their investigation, Novatech was applying pressure as a dissatisfied vendor. Our CEO scheduled a video conference with my former company's executives. He invited me to attend without explaining why. When the call connected, I saw 3 pale executives on screen. The moment they saw me sitting next to our CEO, understanding and fear flashed across their faces. "We're calling to inform you that your vendor contract is under review," our CEO said bluntly. "We've become aware of internal ethics concerns that affect our organizational stability." One executive, clearly sweating despite air conditioning, stammered, "We weren't aware that Miss Kira has joined your organization." I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm and professional. "You should have thought of that before you called me harmless." The silence on their end was absolute. Our CEO continued, "We require all vendor partners to maintain ethical employment practices. We've received information suggesting your recent terminations may not meet those standards. Until this is resolved, we're suspending new project assignments and reviewing whether to continue our existing contracts." After the call ended, our CEO turned to me. "That felt personal. Should I be concerned?" "Only if you're worried about hiring someone who stands up for what's right," I replied. He smiled. "That's exactly why I wanted you here. I needed them to see that their actions have consequences beyond legal complaints. Losing major clients is sometimes the only language corporations understand." I realized he was right. Money talked louder than ethics. The fallout accelerated. Within a week, corporate legal placed both Marjorie and Denise on administrative suspension pending investigation results. The news spread through the company instantly. Jenna sent me updates describing the chaos. People are literally celebrating in the hallways. Everyone knows karma finally arrived. HR is suddenly being incredibly polite to everyone. But not everyone was celebrating. Patricia forwarded me a voicemail from Denise, begging her to reconsider her statement and suggesting she'd misunderstood the situation. "They're panicking," Vincent observed during a conference call with Mr. Alvarez. "Good." Mr. Alvarez cautioned us, "Don't engage directly with anyone from the company. All communication goes through me. Desperate people make mistakes, and we can't give them ammunition to claim witness tampering or harassment." His warning proved prophetic. That evening, my personal phone rang. Marjorie's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail. She called again immediately, then a 3rd time. On the 4th call, I answered and put her on speaker, positioning my phone next to my laptop where recording software was already running. Kira, thank God. Marjorie's voice was thick with tears. Please, you have to listen to me. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You're ruining my career over a misunderstanding. I only told the truth, I said calmly. But you don't understand the full context. I was following orders from above. They made me do it. I didn't have a choice. I said nothing, letting her fill the silence with increasingly desperate justifications. Marjorie's call lasted 23 minutes. She cycled through every manipulation tactic in existence: tears, anger, bargaining, guilt-tripping, and blame-shifting. She claimed she'd always respected me, that the decision had been made above her pay grade, that she'd fought to keep me but was overruled by executives who wanted fresh blood. None of it was consistent with the emails and chat logs where she'd actively celebrated my removal. Please, she finally begged, can't you just clarify your statement? Tell them it was a misunderstanding? I have a family, Kira, 2 kids in college. I can't lose everything over this. Something in me almost softened. Almost. Then I remembered her laughing at that bar, bragging about how easy it was to discard people like me, calling me harmless. Marjorie, I only told the truth, I repeated. If the truth ruins you, that's not my fault. That's yours. You made these choices. You celebrated these decisions. You bragged about them on camera. This is just consequences. I ended the call. Immediately, my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Alvarez. Did Marjorie just contact you? Yes, I recorded it. Send it to me immediately and do not speak to her again without me present. She's desperate and trying to compromise your testimony. This is witness intimidation. I sent him the audio file. Within an hour, he'd forwarded it to corporate legal with a note about improper contact with a complainant. The next morning, I received another official email. Corporate legal wanted to schedule a formal meeting with me and their ethics committee. The board was now involved. The virtual meeting with the ethics committee was surreal. 6 board members, corporate legal representatives, and my lawyer all present on a video conference. Everyone was unfailingly polite and apologetic. Miss Kira, we want to start by acknowledging that you were treated inappropriately, the committee chair began. We've reviewed all evidence submitted and we're deeply troubled by what we found. They asked me to walk through my timeline once more, asking clarifying questions but never challenging my account. It became clear they already believed me. This meeting was about determining the scope of the problem and the company's legal exposure. We were not aware that management had been approving terminations using false premises, one board member admitted. Corporate legal had been given incomplete information by HR and department management. The documentation we reviewed did not reflect the reality of these situations. In other words, Marjorie and her allies had been lying to everyone, including the people who could have stopped them. After an hour of detailed questions, the committee chair leaned toward his camera. Miss Kira, we would like to discuss settlement. If we offer appropriate financial compensation, would you be willing to sign a confidentiality agreement? Before I could respond, Mr. Alvarez interjected smoothly. My client needs time to consider any offer. We'll need to review all terms carefully before making any decisions. The chair nodded. Of course, but I want you to know we're prepared to be very generous. We want to resolve this situation fairly and quickly. After the meeting ended, Mr. Alvarez muted his microphone and turned to me. They're offering to buy your silence. The question is whether you're selling. I spent 3 days thinking about the settlement offer. The money they were dangling was substantial, enough to compensate for lost wages and then some. With a confidentiality agreement, I could take the check and move forward with my life at Novatech. But something goned at me. If I signed an NDA and stayed quiet, other employees would never know what had happened. The company could continue these practices, and future victims would have no warning, proof, no voice. I called Mr. Alvarez, Patricia, and Vincent for a conference call. I don't want to just take the money and disappear, I told them. That's exactly what they want. Quiet settlements mean nothing changes. They'll just keep doing this to other people. What do you want instead? Patricia asked. Accountability, real policy changes, protection for other employees. I paused. I want them to admit what they did and fix their broken system so nobody else has to go through this. Mr. Alvarez was quiet for a moment. That's going to cost them more than money, Kira. That's going to cost them reputation and control. They might refuse. Then we dope public, I said firmly. We take this to the labor board, the media, wherever we need to. I'm done being paid to stay silent. Vincent spoke up, emotion in his voice. I'm with Kira. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who comes after us. If we take the money and sign away our voices, we're abandoning them. Patricia agreed immediately. Let's do this right. Mr. Alvarez smiled slightly. All right then, let's show them what real justice looks like. The counter-proposal we submitted was radical compared to typical settlement agreements. Yes, we wanted financial compensation for what we'd lost, but we also demanded written acknowledgement of wrongdoing, immediate policy reforms, independent oversight of all future terminations, protected reporting channels for employees, and mandatory training on age discrimination for all managers. They'll never agree to this, Patricia said nervously after we sent it. Then we'll see them in court and in the newspapers, Mr. Alvarez replied calmly. We waited 3 agonizing days. Then the ethics committee requested another meeting. The chair looked exhausted when the video call connected. Your demands are significant and will require substantial changes to our operations and culture. They're necessary changes, I replied. If you'd had these systems in place years ago, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't have systematically discriminated against older employees. You wouldn't be facing investigations. You wouldn't be losing clients. That's a fair point, he sighed heavily. The board has reviewed your proposal extensively. We're prepared to accept your terms. I felt my breath catch. All of them? We'll provide full compensation to all 3 complainants, acknowledge wrongdoing in writing, implement the policy changes you've outlined, create an independent oversight position, and establish protected reporting channels. We need some flexibility on implementation timelines, but we're committed to making these changes. Mr. Alvarez negotiated the specific details while I sat in stunned silence. They were actually agreeing. A corporation was choosing to implement real ethical reforms rather than fighting to maintain their broken system. The chair explained their reasoning. Losing Novatech and potentially other major clients would cost us tens of millions. If these practices become public knowledge, the reputational damage could be catastrophic. Your reforms are expensive, but cheaper than the alternatives. It wasn't justice motivated by morality. It was justice motivated by economics and fear. But I take it. Real change was real change, regardless of motivation. 6 weeks after that devastating meeting where Marjorie fired me with her budget cuts lie, the company made an internal announcement. Both Marjorie and Denise had been terminated for serious violations of company policy and ethical standards. The announcement didn't mention victims by name or specific details, but it outlined sweeping new protective measures: an independent ethics officer reporting directly to the board, mandatory quarterly training on discrimination and retaliation, and a confidential hotline for reporting concerns without fear of punishment. My case was cited anonymously in the announcement as an example of why these changes were critical and overdue. Jenna called me within minutes of the announcement. Everyone knows it's about you and the others. People are talking about it constantly. There's actually hope here now that things might actually change. Novatech maintained their vendor relationship with my old company, but only after receiving documented proof of the reforms and meeting with the new ethics officer. Other clients, hearing rumors of the investigation, demanded similar assurances before continuing their contracts. The financial impact on my former employer was severe. Beyond the settlement payments to Patricia, Vincent, and me, they faced the costs of implementing oversight systems, mandatory training programs, the ethics officer salary, and consulting fees for policy redesign, plus the intangible costs of damaged reputation and client skepticism. 3 weeks later, an anonymous email arrived in my inbox. No text, just an attached image showing Marjorie standing in line at a job fair, holding a paper resume like any other job seeker. The subject line read, She finally faced budget cuts too. I stared at the image for a long time. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected, just a tired sense of justice finally arriving, heavy and complicated. She'd lost everything she'd worked for, just like she'd tried to do to me. The difference was she'd earned her consequences. I deleted the email without responding. Months passed. I settled into my role at Novatech, building a research team that valued experience and expertise. I made it a point to mentor younger analysts while also actively protecting older employees from the kind of discrimination I'd faced. The settlement money went partly into savings, but I donated a significant portion to a legal fund that helped older workers facing employment discrimination. If my fight could make someone else's fight easier, the whole ordeal would mean something beyond my personal vindication. Patricia found a new position at a respected consulting firm where her experience was valued. Vincent decided to retire, but he did so on his own terms, with his dignity intact and a settlement that made his retirement comfortable. We stayed in touch, bonded permanently by our shared battle. My former company struggled for several months, rebuilding their reputation and operations. Some of the reforms actually stuck. The independent ethics officer, a woman named Dr. Simmons, took her job seriously. Several employees used the confidential hotline to report concerns that were properly investigated and addressed. It wasn't perfect. Corporations rarely change completely, but it was measurably better than before. One afternoon, I drove past my old office building on my way to meet a client. I looked up at those familiar windows where I'd spent 16 years of my life. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or grief. I felt free. Looking back now from the comfort of my new career, I can see how being terminated actually forced me to reclaim something I'd lost over those 16 years. I'd spent so long trying to prove myself to people who would never value me that I'd forgotten to value myself. At Novatech, I lead a team that respects experience. I mentor younger workers on recognizing workplace abuse early before it destroys their confidence. I teach them that loyalty should flow both ways, not just upward. I make sure they understand their worth before someone tries to convince them they're disposable. The settlement covered my financial losses and then some, but the real victory was forcing a corporation to choose ethics over convenience, even if that choice was motivated by fear of consequences rather than genuine moral awakening. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for in the corporate world. I think about Marjorie sometimes, standing in that job fair line with her paper resume. I don't take pleasure in her downfall, but I don't regret it either. She built her career on exploiting vulnerable employees, on celebrating their removal, on bragging about how easy it was to discard people she considered obsolete. Eventually, that foundation collapsed under the wake of its own corruption. My career now is built on competence, integrity, and mutual respect. That's a foundation that won't crumble when tested. Last week, a former colleague from my old company reached out. She's facing a similar situation, being restructured despite excellent performance reviews and 16 years of service. The pattern was continuing, even with the new oversight. I connected her with Mr. Alvarez. I sent her copies of the policy changes we'd fought for. I told her she wasn't alone, and she wasn't powerless. Because that's the thing they never understood. They tried to erase me with 3 words: budget cuts only. But I answered with something more powerful than words. I answered with evidence, persistence, and the refusal to disappear quietly. They called me harmless. They thought age made me weak, that loyalty made me compliant, that 16 years of service meant I'd accept any treatment rather than start over. They were wrong about all of it. I walk into Novatech's office each morning as Director of Research Analytics, leading a team that values what I bring to the table. I mentor young analysts who remind me why I fought so hard. I protect older employees who deserve better than I got. And every time I see my title on my office door, I remember that cold conference room, Marjorie's dismissive voice, and that folder labeled Onbolden Clan that she thought I wouldn't notice. They tried to replace me with someone younger, cheaper, and more convenient. Instead, they created someone who knew exactly what they were worth and refused to accept anything less. That's not revenge, that's justice. And sometimes when the system works the way it should, those two things look exactly the same. I don't walk past my old company's building anymore. I don't need to. That chapter is closed, not with bitterness, but with the satisfaction of knowing I didn't just survive their attempt to discard me, I made sure nobody else would have to face it alone.